Hi, welcome back to Memos to the President. I'm Ili with a special competitive studies project. We're releasing a new memo on robotics, and I'm here with Abby and Brady, two authors of the memo, to talk about why is this important. Welcome.
Hey, Ellie.
Abby, let's start with you, and then Brady, you can also answer the same question, but I would like our viewers to know a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Yeah, of course. I'm Abby. I'm on SCSP's tech platforms team. So for the past 3.5 years, I've been looking across different tech areas and the innovation ecosystem and trying to apply a strategy lens to technology and national security. And before SCSP, I worked in think tanks and in strategy consulting in Washington, D.C. before taking a break for grad school. So thinking about different issues than technology, but applying some of the same frameworks.
Thanks. Brady?
Thanks, Ilya. It's great to be with you. My name is Brady. I work on SCSP's economy team, and I focus mostly on microelectronics and advanced manufacturing. Before coming to SCSP, spent time in DC doing think tank research and focusing on supply chains. And I remember on my first day, Ilya, you sat me down and told me I was going to be our CHIPS guy and focus on microelectronics and the CHIPS Act.
It's before the CHIPS Act.
Before
right?
the CHIPS Act.
This topic has not gone away, Brady.
It's not gone away. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, first of all, and for covering chips for us. Look, this is a really interesting topic, and I think, personally, I really like this topic. I think it's one of those underreported topics that doesn't get a lot of attention, but is so critical for everything we're going to do in the future. And now when you add AI on top of that, it becomes even more fundamentally important for everything related to advanced manufacturing. So talk to our audience a little bit about what is robotics? Why is this important?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off here. I mean, robotics have been around since the 1960s. I always like to start with the history. I think it's helpful to get context. When we talk about robotics, for a long time people have started by talking about industrial robotics. If you go into any car factory, you'll see hundreds of giant industrial robot arms. Usually, these robots operate entirely off of pre-programmed instructions. So the difference we're seeing today as we apply advanced forms of AI, we're starting to see robots that can reason and plan, that can adapt to changing circumstances, and this is really driving a revolution in manufacturing across many other industries as well.
Yeah, I think this is the beginning of an age of general purpose robots. So rather than constrained environments that have a finite set of rules, we'll see robots in multiple form factors like humanoids or quadrupeds or machines like a car or a drone. Those are all really robotics, and they're going to impact a wide range of sectors. You can think of manufacturing as the ground floor, but there are many industries, smart agriculture, battlefield surgeries, space exploration, the future of food, self-driving labs. This is really going to touch everything. And our roads, self-driving cars alone are going to be a massive thing.
I feel there are several things happening on this space at the same time. Number one is the shrinking of the manufacturing workforce. I mean, as you know, by 2030, we will have 2.1 million jobs in this space, and they will not be humans doing these jobs anymore. So that's one piece. I mean, for the domestic purposes, the advancements of these technologies and the next wave of how we make products is the second piece. But then there's China too, because if you look at China, they're making enormous investments. In 2022, they built more robots than the entire world collectively. So can you talk about all these three elements? Number one, the future of manufacturing here. Number two is when you combine AI and robots, you have now a new domain of advanced manufacturing that is being opened up for you as an opportunity. And then the third piece really is the competition with China.
To your first point, Illy, I think there's a lot of people who really want to rebuild U.S. manufacturing. This has been a theme that's been consistent since the first Trump administration. There's been a lot of policy focus on it. But I haven't heard as many people talking about this huge workforce shortage that we're facing, about 2 million workers by 2030.
Right.
And so usually when people talk about robots, they think about robots taking jobs from humans, but in reality, there's a huge demand signal for robots because we just don't have enough workers to build these factories. So this is really something that we need to get right if we're going to be competitive across these other industries in manufacturing.
Absolutely.
And I think done right, robotics can be part of a pro-growth agenda. The tech is happening. On the AI side, we're seeing models that can reason and plan, and if you can put that in a robot that can learn and plan around its environment, that really changes the game for the types of environments robots can be deployed in. And there's the data piece of this, there's modeling and simulation, which is a really promising way to be able to train robots. And we're seeing multiple form factors for this as well. So the tech is happening. It can be part of sort of a pro-growth approach to making our jobs less dull, dirty, and dangerous.
Right. And I agree with you. I think this topic has entered that sensitive political topic in which nobody wants to talk about robots because I think the automatic response is humans will lose jobs. And that's not the case, as you said, Brady. It's just that we will have shortage of labor going forward. And so how does then robot complement that space? But let's talk a little bit about China. Obviously, we have great companies in the United States building robots, but China has really moved so fast in building, models of robots, capabilities to build robots at scale. So how do you compare, the landscape between here and China?
I think for a while, we could kind of feel comfortable that the U.S. Was way ahead on the software side. We're coming up with the advances in the robot brain and in the software side of robotics. That could be changing with things like DeepSeek. So we need to pay attention to what happens there in terms of China's software side AI capabilities. And then there's the compute piece of that. There are export controls in place that are limiting the training side of AI chips. But there's other types of chips in robots, and Brady can speak more to this. But when we look at deployment and scale and commercialization of technologies, there are other sectors that should be red flashing lights for us with robotics. Think about commercial drones. Think about EVs. China's been able to dominate these spaces because even if it's not inventing the technology, it is able to scale and deploy it and make it cheaply available to the world.
Yeah, to Abby's point, Illy, China's government has placed a huge amount of policy attention on robotics. And that starts with industrial robots. Like you mentioned, they've deployed more robots than the rest of the world combined the last couple of years. To your point earlier about the workforce shortage, China is facing a huge demographic crisis over the next 20 years. Exactly. And so if we have a demographic problem, theirs is much worse.
Absolutely.
And so for them, there's a lot of urgency.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning that China has started to place a lot of attention on humanoid robotics specifically and call them out in their industrial plans. And so they have an industrial plan that they've put out that says, we want to lead the world in humanoid robotic manufacturing by 2027.
Right.
It's coming up very quickly.
Yeah.
And to Abby's point, the U.S. is very good on the software side, but on the hardware side, we risk entering a world where we are reliant on robots that are built in China.
Right.
That's a bad place we don't want to be.
Yeah. And we have some incredible companies, Boston Dynamics with their Atlas and Spot, and everybody has seen those videos. China has a lot of good models. Unitree just really took over the internet a couple of months ago or weeks ago when they showcased that. And then 2 days ago, during the lunar celebration, their New Year, it was the dancing and all the festivities with the Unitree model. So we had AI+Robotics Summit in October, where we had some of our best companies really demoing on stage their robots, from Boston Dynamics to Animal to others. So just talk a little bit about our models that we have seen and what you're seeing coming out of China in terms of these robots.
Yeah, I think that on the pure technology side, so which ones are better robots, the U.S. has amazing companies, like you said, and they're really maybe a little bit better or on par with China there. I think what really matters, though, is which ones are going to be cheaper, which ones are going to have
scale,
which ones are going to have the production timelines that allow people to buy them, and what the environment is like for deploying them, what the regulatory environment, what the laws and rules and norms are really around adoption. And so I think even if the U.S. Robotics companies have better robots, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be ahead. Look at drones. The U.S. companies, their drones are great, but they can't compete with
DJI and
DJI.
the scale of DJI.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Memo I mean, you have clear ideas about how we stay in this game. So do you want to start us off, Brady, by talking about the objectives of the memo and then some of the recommendations, maybe Abby, of like how we stay ahead in this robotics competition?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Illy. I mean, really, our memo starts by making very clear that the U.S. leads in software and AI, and that lead, if we're able to capitalize on it, should give us a huge advantage. Now, the issue is, as I mentioned, that China wants to manufacture robotic hardware. And so how do we get ahead of that problem? I mean, especially thinking about wanting to manufacture things in the U.S., needing to fill this workforce shortage. I think manufacturing robotics in the United States is really critical. This is also a really important area where we can work with our allies and partners, both to build out an integrated supply chain and to just find markets for robots that we would build here. And there's also some national level technology objectives that Abby will talk about that can help spur deployment of these robots and also demonstrate trust and safety in these systems so that people aren't as afraid of them.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the most significant ways that we're behind is that we don't have a strategy for robotics. And because of that, we're not looking across the different sectors that this will impact and coming up with a plan for how we can lead in this technology and all the different ways that it can transform our economy, our military, our defense, and really all the national factors there. So we need to, one, start with a strategy, and that needs to focus on scale and adoption and identifying particular areas where we want to make sure that we are leading. So manufacturing, I think, is a really important one. Agriculture, there's really high potential.
Right.
And I think the defense industrial base, too, is one where we can do things today in peacetime that will be really helpful if we ever need them in
Right.
non-peacetime.
Right.
And I think some of these national level ideas that would really create conditions or positions of advantage for the nation would be a defense network of AI-enabled factories. So factories for things like autonomous vehicles or any types of vehicles or manufacturing equipment. If we can build the machines that make the machines and figure out how to do that at scale and learn process innovation, which China has been really good at, is figuring out manufacturing environments that can iterate and that can evolve and adapt as the things they need to make change and as they learn how to make them better. If we can figure out how to do that and lean into our tremendous advantages in AI to have AI-enabled factories, a network of them around the country, that would put us in a position of technological advantage. And then the data piece of this is just one other thing I think we need to hit on, because the United States was able to lead the ChatGPT moment because there's an internet of data to train large language models on. There's no internet equivalent of data for robotics. It's different silos of data in different sectors and industrial sectors. A lot of it is held by the private sector. There's a few ways around this. Modeling and simulation is really promising. But there's also things we could do with having a third-party data foundry or an environment where pre-commercial industrial data could be shared among small, medium enterprises, startups, academia, and so that we can really build on and create the data pools that we need to be able to train robots effectively.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I'll add to Abby's great points, we really need to get ahead of the China piece as
Right,
well.
right.
There was this news that came out this week that DeepSeek may have distilled OpenAI's model weights and used that
Right.
to help train its model and to
Shocking.
help catch up. Exactly, very, very shocking. And we really need to prevent that same thing from happening in robotics.
Right.
I'm concerned that Chinese robotics companies could use open source platforms that U.S. companies have to help robotics companies train their robots. They could use them to train their cheap robotic hardware, and then we end up very quickly in a position where we're losing. I think this is something we need to get ahead of as quick as we can.
So I think your memo has three critical pillars. Number one is set national goals and ambition, which I think usually has to come from the White House, so therefore memos to the president. The second one is really making adoption much easier across industries, which I think this is where we have a combination of stigma, lack of policies, incentives, everything related to how people adopt robotics for the purposes of their production and manufacturing. And then the last piece really is how do we achieve independence in building robotic industry, right? And to your point about how do we stay ahead of China there. So anything on the cultural piece too, I'll ask you, because I think we had James Cameron do a video for our AI plus Robotics Summit, because this topic, as I said, is really heavy loaded on the cultural piece, you know, because of the movies we have seen, because of the stigma that exists around like robots replacing humans at work. Can you talk about this adoption across industries, how that then trickled down to like the element of human nature and people feeling more comfortable with, you know, having robots at home, working with robots, etc.?
Sure. I think the bottom line is that people don't trust these systems.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
so the question is, how do you create trust in robotics, and how do you trust the system to do what you tell it to do and to not injure a human? There's lots of different ways that you can approach this problem. One thing that has stuck out to me in the U.S., anyone who wants to operate a forklift needs to get a license. And so would it build trust in these systems if, in order to operate a robot in an industrial setting, you need to get a license? That, you know, could make a lot of sense.
I think the biggest cultural unlock is going to happen from the bottom up. So the communities that want to experiment or be test beds, think about San Francisco. 2 years ago, you would have seen a Waymo on the
Right.
street
Very good
and
point
been
there,
like,
yeah.
what is that?
Yeah.
Today, everybody in San Francisco just takes
Right.
them all the time. There's hundreds of them. So I think culture kind of comes with comfort.
Right.
And you see things, you experiment, you start to get used to them. And that, I think if that can bubble up, and especially in the parts of the country that really feel like they are bringing something to the table in terms of the tech and the innovation and want to lean in on adoption, I think we should really empower sort of state, local to do that.
Another area I think, Abby, because I was at CES 2 weeks ago, that I think has huge potential is the aging population and the assistance
Absolutely.
with that group of people. AARP had an incredible exhibit there, showcasing, you know, different ways how robots will help, you know, people when they reach, you know, their old age with walking, with therapies, with physical activities. And so I think that is also how you build that trust that you, Brady, were talking about in terms of how people adopt these technologies.
And that's somewhere we can learn from our allies and partners too. Like South Korea and Japan have
Yeah.
massive aging populations
Right.
and are really leaning into robotics
Exactly.
as a way to help navigate that. And so they bring those strengths. We can work with them, learn from that.
Exactly.
And there are also ways that you can build these systems so that they work with humans better. There's a kind of a subfield of robotics called collaborative robotics, where the robot is built to work with humans, and it's built with safety precautions built into the system. And I think, you know, showing people that you can build robots that are designed to work with people and that are designed to keep people safe, I think that can also help build trust in the
Right.
systems as well.
So, okay, let's put this in a practical example. In 5 years, 7 years, where do you think you will see these kind of robots entering our life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm especially excited about the potential for robots in manufacturing. I mean, again, we've talked about the need to build more stuff at home, the need to build clean energy, the need to build chip fabs in the U.S. I think, you know, robots can really help meet that workforce shortage. I think also in logistics, and to Abby's point about manufacturing logistics being the ground floor, I think that can kind of prime us for a broad deployment of robots across the economy and other sectors, and even going into people's homes. I think that's a little bit further out personally, but I think, you know, these structured environments where there's kind of these repetitive tasks, I think those are great training grounds for robots to train. And then maybe in 10 or 15 years, we get to broad deployment across many other sectors as well.
Right. Abby?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see the connection of the progress we're seeing in AI with the deployment of robotics in the real world. So maybe in a few years, you call your Waymo to take you to work or take you to school, and it asks you how your day is. It reminds you to check if you packed your lunch with you, and like you're going to have this mix of the cognitive intelligence and the physical intelligence helping you with your day-to-day tasks, like
Right.
getting where you need to go and back.
Right, your personal assistant type of,
Yep.
that knows your calendar, knows...
And can drive you to
yeah,
work.
exactly. All right, I've asked this question to all my guests, but you both came out of DC to DC. Why do you think working in DC or anywhere in departments and agencies in DC is important for our nation? What compelled you to come to DC? And why do you think for anybody that is graduating now, thinking about moving to DC, should come to DC?
Yeah, I guess just to kick us off, I mean, it's a really interesting time to work on technology policy in DC because, you know, all of these startup founders are coming to Washington to talk with Congress, to talk with the administration. It really feels like the center of the world right now, and many of the decisions that are going to shape our future and shape the technologies that we see built are being made in DC right now. And so I think, you know, it's a really just amazing opportunity to be part of really interesting discussions and dialogues on, you know, how do we ensure the U.S. leads in these technologies, and then how do we use those technologies for good. And I mean, DC it holds amazing opportunities for public service while trying to answer these really big questions about how do we shape our future. I think that's really exciting.
Abby?
Yeah, I think DC is the best place in the world to try to make a difference on the areas that you care about, whether it's technology or a region of the world. You can sort of connect the people making decisions for the country with the information that they need to make those decisions well. And I think you can't really do that outside of DC until you really understand what are the levers of power, how does bureaucracy actually work, how are decisions made, what are the best ways for people to stay informed on these issues. And so I think if you want to make a difference there, there's really no better place to do that than DC.
Thank you both. I think this is really an important topic, and I'm glad you guys drafted this memo to the president on robotics. As I said at the beginning, it's one of those areas that doesn't get enough attention, and I think it's such an important topic because we always talk about software-related issues, but this really gets to the future of manufacturing, the future of human-machine, coexistence that we will face, and ultimately, winning the robotics competition with China, because I think they are a serious player in this space, more serious than I think than any other space that we have faced so far. So thank you both. I encourage everybody to read this memo. And for those of you watching or listening, thanks so much for tuning in. Until the next episode, I'm Milo with a special competitive studies project. Have a good one.